Welcome, I'm Roger Lotz, and this is Austin Faith Dialogue.
Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs series at the crossroads of religion and life. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues in the area in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Join us now for this week's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
Christian radio is a format that used to mean listening to just gospel music and sermons from fire and brimstone preachers. But as radio formats have diversified, so too has Christian radio, especially here in Austin. Unlike other cities, your ability to get Christian radio and a variety of it seems plentiful here in the capital city. Just take a look at this column, written in April by the Austin American-Statesman radio critic, John Herndon. In the article, one former Austin radio program director states the new fact for radio listeners when he says Christian radio isn't any longer the stereotype. To find out for ourselves what the stereotype was and what the new sound of Christian radio is, we decided to take a look at the subject through the eyes of Colin Lambert, program director at KIXL.
Good afternoon and welcome to Direct Line. I'm Colin Lambert and we thank you for joining us today. It is a Friday afternoon.
Christian radio probably began some years back dealing with mainly preachers and teachers and what they had to say, the message of Scripture to share with people. And I would probably say sometime in that period people started doing Christian music in a contemporary fashion, and you began to see a split in Christian radio, Christian music formats and Christian talk teaching formats, and they've kind of stayed separated. However, there are stations that do a little of both. Most of the times they're totally separate.
Medicine Hat in Three Hills, Alberta, to fight what they view as a violation of their constitutional rights. Canada's constitution guarantees religious liberty, and
this market is unique because of the amount of stations we have 3 stations currently active, and for one, this part of the country does accept Christian radio more than some parts of the country do. There's a lot of people that support that. In a town like Austin, it might seem hard to believe. It is a center of education, a center of government, which usually means a more liberal place, but that might mean from our standpoint a bigger challenge to bring our message to the people. And I think we've had these stations, most of them here, at least 2 of them, for over 10, 15 years.
You've heard about neglectful and abusive conditions some children are raised in today. It can sometimes be overwhelming. Stories of...
For so many years, that's been one of the biggest problems with Christian radio, is they have not been programmed correctly. They have not targeted the audience they want to target. They've just put something on the air to have something on the air. These days, you have to think about Rush Limbaugh being out there. You have to think about the state capitol being there. You have to think about the needs of the community, and narrow casting is the term, if you will. You've got to find that niche and apply as much pressure as you can to them to get them to listen to you.
Down in Austin. The Earth Summit in Rio, ladies and gentlemen, is going on now, and some of this...
And certainly there are going to be those who turn by and hear the mayor and think, wow, what a great thing. We get to the next hour, we start talking about how to strengthen your family, they may flip off the dial. We just have to provide good radio and do the best we can and hope they'll stick with us through the time that we're on.
But Lyndon, we thank you for your call, and we'll keep on top of it.
Sounds good.
Thank you for calling.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
We're now joined by 2 people who have a significant say into what you hear on their radio stations. First, we're joined by Colin Lambert, who you just met in our feature. As we said, he is currently the program director of KIXL AM. The station has recently made a major programming change, becoming talk-oriented. Also with us today is Sherlin Priest, who as general manager at KNLE FM describes his station as a place where listeners can hear the best in contemporary Christian music. We'd like to note that Michael Kendall of KFIT was also hoping to join us today, but was unable to due to a scheduling conflict. However, welcome to you both for joining us today. I'd like to start off with the basic question. What is Christian radio, and what should the listener expect to hear when tuning into a Christian radio station? I'll start with you, Colin.
Well, I guess it depends on what station you turn to first. Most stations have defined themselves, as I said, as a music station or as a talk station. There are stations like we used to be where we did a lot of teaching and preaching during the day and music in the mornings and afternoons, kind of a combination of both. But I think you'll see more diversity in the Christian music and Christian talk field and radio as we go along, just as you are in the regular secular radio stations.
Sherlin, what would your response be?
Well, I'd say that I have to agree for once with John Herndon of the Austin American Statesman that Christian radio really no longer fits the stereotype. And we've been doing for the last, it'll be 12 years next month that KNLE has been going for 12 years in the Austin market, making a difference. But what we've noticed is in other markets across the country, people are no longer looking at the Christian broadcast medium the way that they did. Initially, a lot of stations went on for the purpose of making cash, and that's not the case of all stations, but you can still hear some of this stuff coming across the Mexican border. We'll carve up an oak desk and sell you splinters of the cross, to make $1. The prayer clause, the things that the exposés have been recently on television about where religion is used for money. That is a motivation for the reason why people used to get into Christian radio, because it was lucrative. Then about 10 years ago, there came an influx of stations where people were really in it to try and reach people with a more positive message. And about that time, one of the spurring factors of that was contemporary Christian music. Up until that time, religious music was basically in the realms of hymns or country and western ballads that were done by people whose lifestyles included being in the bar the night before and portraying one lifestyle while they were there, and then a different lifestyle while they were on the stage the next night performing at a church.
But you've got something special here in Austin compared to most other parts of the country. I mean, you have something here where there are about 6 stations overall, 3 potentially full-time stations, and then some that do it on a part-time basis, that have Christian radio involved in their format. Why is it so heavily heard here, where in other parts of the country, even if you go to a major market city like New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, you won't hear as much Christian radio in a population size that might want more of it?
Well, it goes back to the same evolution that I've been discussing, and that is that the music has changed. There are now a lot of artists who are playing music that sounds now like regular music. The music which they play has the gospel message that they wanted 10 years and even 15 years ago to try and bring back into the religious music, but in a style now that is consistent with what we listen to on a regular radio aimed at the masses. And so basically the music style is now popular, and other stations are cueing into the fact that this music is no longer for little old ladies. I'm going to offend somebody. It's no longer for the meek and mild-mannered anymore, I guess. It's no longer for the stereotype Christian. It's now for the Christian of today and for the people of today.
Now that we've offended all those little old ladies watching us, who is the average listener of your station?
Average listener of our station is a female listener between about 18 and 49 years old. She has about average of 2 children, and she is a consumer, and basically the ideal that every other station is trying to program for. And we try to program the station musically like any other popular station to reach people, not just Christians.
Colin, what would your average listener be like?
I would say probably we're shooting for, Well, with the music that we had, it was more for a female, 30, 32 years old is the central part of that, and 25 to 54 in the main part. But with the change in format that you talked about to an all-talk format, we are targeting now males heavily as well, because the talk format seems to be listened to quite a bit by males. I just wanted to say about as well about the reason that more people today might be listening to Christian radio is that many of those who grew up in the 60s and 70s and sowed their wild oats, so to speak, have begun to come back. They're raising children. They're concerned about the surroundings, the community their children are growing up in. They're looking for help in parenting, and a lot of that information is what we try to provide them.
How much, though, is there in your format, since you're more talk-oriented, is there in the message, in the idea that you've got a little bit of labeling on you? You're a Christian radio station that is talk-oriented, whereas another radio station that is just talk-oriented can mix it up on issues all over the spectrum. How much do you have to worry about what issues you get involved with or deal with on the air, and also the idea that you don't want to offend those listeners that you have?
Well, first of all, we have three main parts of our programming. The first is our morning program, which is a news and information program. It has commentaries. It is a two-person morning show, Dick Pickens and Lisa Salcedo, and they are basically there to help you get going. They've got some lighthearted stories. They've got the news of the day, the weather, things like that. So we're trying to meet people's needs as they need to get up and go to work. During the middle of the day, we have mostly preachers and teachers, and they're just sharing straight from the Bible what they feel like God would have them share, what messages they would like to share with the audience. And even that, you're hearing more information for the family about what's going on around them. In my show in the afternoon, I'm not afraid to tackle any subject. We will have days where we talk about things that are specifically of interest to a Christian or religious audience. And there are days, like I mentioned, where we have the mayor on, or we have a financial advisor like we did yesterday, where we are able to share all sorts of information that is very effective in meeting the needs of whoever might be listening.
An interesting point was brought up when I was doing a little bit of research about this topic, and I guess the thing that always you look at is the idea of where we are in relation to the Bible Belt, because the Bible Belt is supposedly just above us geographically, and we're supposedly underneath the Bible Belt. But how much influence does being near the Bible Belt influence the stations, or just the idea of Christian radio in Austin? Are we a part of the Bible Belt geographically because we're so close to it?
I just heard recently that Austin and surrounding area is the buckle of the Bible Belt. So
Okay.
we're right there in it as far as I'm concerned. Austin, as I mentioned, is going to be a place, because it's the seat of government and because it's the place of a state university, that is going to tend to be a little more liberal. But you go out just outside of town to some of the smaller towns in the surrounding community, and just up the road to Waco, you're going to find those Bible Belt people that you're talking about.
Since Colin says we're the buckle of the Bible Belt, does that make the listener a little more conservative, and thus what you put on the air, you harbor to a little bit more of conservatism?
I'm going to say that people are people no matter where they're at, and I feel like we've fallen off the buckle of the Bible Belt. I feel more like Austin is the third coast of the United States, or becoming that. Used to be that people looked for trends in music to L.A. or they looked to New York, and presently a lot of musicians, a lot of famous musicians, Stevie Ray Vaughan came out of Austin. If you talk to just a normal person on the street, he's starting to recognize that Austin is the center of music. What we're trying to do is make sure that if Christian music is exposed, that it gets exposed here in a vital market where people can start to catch the fact, well, some of our artists that play on KNLE are now showing up on Arsenio Hall. Some people say, oh, they've sold out because they're now on that man's show, because he also has artists like Madonna. But, you know, let's face it, people that went on Johnny Carson, he had people that were of all different persuasions, because he was a talk show host. He just had people on of different persuasions. And there's all kinds of people in the world, just as there are in Austin. So really what we're trying to do is we're trying to, I guess, put up with some of the criticism, but there's very small criticism. It showed in John Herndon's contest that they had, or I guess it was the Statesman's Contest.
We'll get back to that
yeah.
point. And
Yeah.
I want to continue this debate on where we are, where we lie geographically. But at this point, we need to take a short break. We'll be back with more of Austin Faith Dialogue and our discussion of Christian radio right after this.
Serving Austin means serving you. That has always been the primary goal of Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We are religion in action through the work of these organizations. Each plays a key role in making the capital city a better place to live. But we can't do it alone. Do you have some spare time, talents, or any resources that you can share? If you do, please call AMM at 472-7627 because serving Austin means serving you.
We're back with more of Austin Faith Dialogue. Today's topic is Christian radio here in the capital city. Joining us in our discussion are Sherlyn Priest, station manager of KNLE, and Colin Lambert, program director of KIXL. Sherlyn, we were discussing musical tastes and the crossover of some artists. And we have a full screen that shows contemporary Christian radio and top gospel albums that are shown in the paper on a weekly basis, so there's got to be a popularity of that music if it's highlighted each week. And you talked about earlier that sometimes some of your listeners feel a little bit of a neglect of an artist that may cross over from what used to be his gospel roots or his contemporary Christian roots into more of the mainstream. When you program your station, do you have to sometimes worry about that somebody like Amy Grant, she's been a contemporary Christian musical artist, went over to pop. Now some people say she's trying to come back to some of her Christian musical roots. Do you have to worry about that, where you program her in your station?
We certainly have to be aware of that kind of position that people have their own opinions, and there are as many opinions as there are people. Basically, to put that rumor to bed once and for all, Amy Grant has said many times personally to our staff members, to interviewers, through releases from her record company. She's made her position very clear, and that is she has not sold out on contemporary Christian music whatsoever.
But she's become popular within the framework of top 40.
And that's her goal. Her goal is to bring the common man back into the church, to be able to bring the common person on the street, some sort of bridge between the people that are the stereotypically religious people and those people who are interested in being a Christian, but that are not listening because they're listening to some other music. So she's basically a bridge, what she's trying to do. Michael W. Smith, Kathy Tricoli, and a few others are becoming successful. Take Six is becoming successful. Some groups are crossing the other way. Marilyn McCoo from the Fifth Dimension. Glenn Campbell just recently started recording contemporary Christian music. The words in his songs are very indicative of his belief, and
in fact, his Christian album outsold his last, or was outselling his last secular album.
Now, what I found kind of interesting in the article that was written in April by John Herndon was the idea that he said the music actually sounds good on KNLE, and that it's actually even the message, the Christian message, is understated. I want to focus that on you, Colin. Can you understate your Christian values when you're doing a talk radio station?
Sure.
Or does it go just the opposite, where you overstate it?
Sure, you can do that, and we do our best to balance that throughout the day. Obviously, the preachers and teachers are going to be talking about what their position is. Our morning program, which is with the news and information, you'll hear the news pretty straightforward. You'll hear the commentary and the special features that will be obviously a little more conservative. I state my own personal view. It's my program in the afternoons, and I talk about my position on things. But I deal with all subjects.
If you had to classify yourself, would you classify yourself more in the liberal column, conservative column?
Oh,
or
certainly
in between?
conservative. Certainly conservative.
Is there any room for, in listening to your station, you have a program on Saturday afternoon, Town Criers. Those guys seem pretty conservative to me.
Very.
You got Jack Chambers on the weekends. He's notoriously known as being very conservative
and political.
Is there any room in Christian talk at this point for hearing a liberal viewpoint?
Well, there might be. I don't know how it would be received. We allow a liberal viewpoint on our show. We very many times will have issue discussions where we have somebody on representing a very liberal position and somebody on representing a very conservative position. And in those type situations, I'm just kind of the moderator. And of course, the phone calls, one of the most exciting things I've seen since I've started doing the show is the callers that we have gotten that have never listened to Christian radio. First-time callers, people of obvious liberal persuasions and backgrounds that are calling and are listening and are participating in our program. And that's what it's all about, an ability to state your view, whatever it is.
Throwing it to you, Sherland, is that understatement from your station, do you find that as a compliment, or how do you react to that comment in that article that your message is understated?
I'd say that I find it a compliment that finally we're not being discriminated against and being even talked about at all. Okay, understated, that was John Herndon's words, but on the other hand, he was listening. I think that's wonderful that a correspondent like that would take the time to listen to the station, and if he's pleased about how it sounds, that's one more person that's pleased, and I take it as a compliment that he took the time to consider it. As far as being an understated message, we let the musicians state the message, and basically there are a lot of different messages because there are a lot of different kinds of people out there. Basically, it's a question of balance, because you have the conservative Christians out there, you have the liberal Christians out there, and you have about 30% of our listeners, they're not even Christian at all. And so if they're listening, they're thinking about the messages that are brought to them by the artists. We're a little bit different. Then we can't just come out and preach at people, because we're trying to attract an audience to listen to what we have to say without scaring them off. So I'd say there's no compromise at all in the lyrical messages, but neither is, and this is what makes it unique to the contemporary Christian music of today, there is no compromise in the music format in which it's presented. That's why we're seeing this outpouring into the mainstream market, is because the music is acceptable and they find the message non-offensive.
Something that we discussed when we interviewed you before doing this piece for today's program, we were talking about that radio is a business, and that when you go out there, you're trying to get the most listeners possible, or at least the most listeners that you want to have listening to your station for advertisers. When you go at this, when you program your stations, how do you do it here in Austin? Are you going to look at yourself that you want to be number one for Christian radio stations here in Austin, or do you want to be number one of all the radio stations here in Austin? How do you try and market yourselves? I'll start with you.
I'd like to be number one here in Austin. I think that's a long, hard goal in this market with the country influence. But talk is popular in Austin, and I guess right now our biggest goal is to get up there right next to KLBJ, who's the other talk format in town, offer something that a large portion of Austinites and Central Texans believe in, to listen to and to participate with, and so that they can be informed.
Sherland, how do you market your station? Do you look at yourself as just wanting to compete with those that do it, or with everyone?
Well, we look at it this way. We want listeners to listen to the music that we have, and I feel based on, can I talk about the contest now? Where we
oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay. In the listeners poll 2 years in a row, this is the last one that was done and the one before that. There has not been one this year. But KNLE positioned second place in all of Austin on popular votes on a month-long radio contest. Basically, people from the general public sent in ballots voting for the radio station that they thought that they'd like to vote for.
So there are people that are listening, and they might be based on the
Okay,
popularity vote.
34 radio stations in Austin. The one that took first place, and by a narrow margin, I might add, both years, was the country station. So if you consider the country station as being, according to the demographic criteria for Austin, 50% of the people in Austin like country. So being number 2, that puts us at the top of all the contemporary stations as far as the popular vote. That may not be in one or other poll, but at least in that particular poll of the listeners 2 years in a row, we're sitting right on top. And I feel like we're doing our job, because you don't have to be Christian to listen, but you can be Christian to listen. But you can have a good piece of music to listen to. You can enjoy yourself. You can enjoy every part of our programming, regardless of your religious affiliation. Whether you're a conservative Christian, whether you're a liberal Christian, it doesn't really matter. You can still get enjoyment from the music, because we don't have a bias on it. It's all a very balanced thing.
Looking at, in the time that we have left, at the future of this format, you two are the prime example. There is diversification. Sherland, you do more music.
Mm-hmm.
Colin, you do talk. Is there going to be even more diversification within this format? Is it going to go even splinter down even more so than it has here in Austin? And are we here in Austin on the front of where this format is going to be taken all across the country?
I don't know how much more can be done. Unfortunately, most Christian radio stations across the country are listener supported, or many of them are, as KNLE is, or there are some that are commercial like ours. The money has been the biggest problem in keeping Christian radio going. I think you're going to see all music formats, all talk formats, and some that are doing a little bit of both. I don't see much more diversification, but ours, the all talk format, is something brand new. It is what I would consider cutting-edge radio.
Sherland, I'm going to give you the last word.
I have to agree with Colin on one point, and that is that the talk format that his station is taking a bold stance there to be able to split fully away from music. Most stations across the country play a blend, and by doing that, they can't really serve two masters. They'll either do a good job on the talk and a terrible job on the music, or they'll do a good job on the music and a terrible job on the talk. What we've been able to do here in Austin is to coexist with our two stations and be able to serve one particular aspect of the program really, really well. There's room for growth on that in every market, but in Austin, I think you're going to see this is going to develop, by virtue of its location, one of the best.
I hate to interrupt you. I'm sorry, but our time's up.
Okay.
I'd like to thank my guests, Sherland Priest of KNLE and Colin Lambert of KIXL, for joining us today, and I'd like to thank you at home for watching. Please join us again next week for another edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. Until then, peace.
For more information, call Austin Metropolitan Ministries at 472-7627.